My original teacher was Jim Rohn, when I met him when I was 17. And I wanted to know why all my fathers were broke, because they were good men. You know, I loved all four of my fathers. And I remember him saying, Tony, we're all equal as souls, but we're not equal in the marketplace. I was like, what does that mean? And he said, well, think about it. He goes, you need to become more valuable if you want to have economic freedom. He said, you have to work on yourself more than anything else, and you have to work on it in a way where there's something you can do for others better than anyone else, or at least more, at better quality. And he gave me an example of like working at McDonald's, and he said, you know, if you work at McDonald's, you make whatever it was in those days, $5 an hour, whatever it was. And I go, yeah, but that seems so unfair. And he goes, yeah, and teachers, I give the example of teachers, and there's these billionaires, you know, that make $1 billion a year, hedge fund guy, you know? And he said, Tony, the guy you just mentioned, he provided a 40% return last year, and that went to nonprofits and everything else. He said, that means those organizations double their money almost every 2 years. He is adding massive value, hundreds of $1 billion, so they made $1 billion. He goes, this person is doing a job that anyone can learn in 20 minutes or half a day. So it's a beginning job. He said, you got to think of it as one thing. It's all about adding value. How can you do more for others than anybody else in the world? And that stuck with me. I mean, I was just like, I decided I wanted to do more for others than anybody in the world. In order to do that, I had to have certain skills, and I went after those skills, and I still do. Like, it's a never-ending thing. If you think you're a master, you're full of it, right? Yeah. So I think that's probably some of the best advice I've received, at least on life and business and direction, and it affected my mission.
Need motivation?
Watch the top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Tony Robbins, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, change your psychology.
The difference between making it or not is psychology and skill. You need them both. And honestly, skill is the smaller of the two. I'm gonna give you a ton of strategies this week. I'm gonna do psychology first, and you're gonna see why as this day goes by, because you're gonna discover when people stand up and we figure out what's the chokehold on their business, 80% of the time, it's gonna be their psychology. The chokehold on the growth of your business is the psychology and skills of the leader, period. That's it. And if we change those two things, skills too, marketing skills, financial intelligence, recruiting, training, all those things. We train those too. Don't get me wrong, we got to do the skills also. But I could give you every skill. How many of you have learned it before that was invaluable from some source, a mentor, a coach, an event, a university, I don't know what. And you were excited about it, and then you never actually followed through. Who's done this before? Say, I. Listen, knowledge is not power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week. My goal is to make you execute. I can't make you, but I can get you where you tap into that part of yourself. And that shift is the most important shift of these few days.
Rule number 3, unlock your own true nature.
All of us, we could take our work and think of work as being like a gift. I personally believe that one of the greatest gifts outside my love that I can give another human being is my labor. But there's 3 gifts of labor you might have within your nature, meaning you can master anything, but under stress, people tend to go back to their true nature. And there are 3 gifts of labor that you can give. One of those gifts we might call the gift of being an artist or a talent, or another word for it would be a truly skilled producer. Some people, the reason you know this is your gift is what you love to do is to create a product or service and deliver it to people, and you're enamored by that. The woman over here who was doing the work, if you recall, in hospice, she would be a perfect example of an artist. She's not in it. She wants to make money, don't get me wrong, but she would never trade the money for the impact. So when someone is in it as an artist, and by the way, most businesses are started by artists. There's somebody who was an amazing negotiator, an amazing fashion designer, amazing code writer. And they said, I work for this company and they don't do a good job for customers and I can do a better job. I don't work for them, and they start their own company thinking that the company is all driven just by the sales or the negotiation or the code or the fashion. But a company is much more complex than that, especially as it grows. So an artist is in it for the impact. And yes, they want to make money, don't get me wrong, but it's not the first thing and they won't trade it. When I talk to artists about selling their business, they look at me like I'm trying to sell their child. The second gift you might have is the gift of being a manager leader. A manager leader is someone who lives to manage people and processes. They love to figure out how to maximize a business by changing the gears, creating a new process, working with people. And those people love it. Now, they are not artists in that their talent or skill, they're not there delivering it directly to the client. They want to work on the people that are directly delivering to the client. They want to work on the system that makes this business work. And so they think it differently. They're inspired by different things. They make different decisions. Is one better or worse than the other? Yes or no? No, they're just different. And by the way, you might say I have both those skills. I bet you do, but they're not equal because they're different types of skills. So you might have them both, but there's one that is your true nature, that when things are going well, you're going to go back to it. When things are really up, you're going to go back to it. Under stress and under excitement, we return to our nature. By the way, a great company can't be great without great artists, talent, who really deliver extraordinary products or services. A company cannot maintain greatness and grow unless they have some great manager leaders who can run the process and the people. They're both critical components. The third choice of service, the third gift you can give, is that of an entrepreneur. And while most of you in this room would call yourself an entrepreneur and you would be entrepreneurial, by this definition, it's a little different. Most people think of an entrepreneur as anybody who starts multiple businesses. No, that's not true. Some artists are multiple businesses because they want to get all kinds of things for all kinds of people. Some managers want to do multiple businesses so they feel like they have multiple systems. But an entrepreneur is in it for one thing, the juice of risk. They want to make money. And by the way, an entrepreneur, will they sell this business? Yes or no? For the right price, they'll sell anything. And their mindset is, sell it, I'll start another one. Sell it, I'll buy another one. They are not attached. They might enjoy the product or service. They might be proud of the product or service, but they're in it for the risk. And they're the kind of person that when they lose massively, they jump up, dust themselves off, and want to do it again.
Rule number 4, be creative and caring.
Lifestyle's not about money. It's about two things, creativity and caring. It doesn't take money, it just takes a little creativity to think about those you love and think what would light them up. It will light you up more than anything else, I promise you. To surprise them, to do beautiful, special things, little things. It makes people feel important, needed, loved, appreciated. What better way to invest than invest in your relationships with those you love? And you can't give joy to everybody else that you love without giving joy to yourself. And then there's another kind. The other kind is where you invest in those you don't even know. Not for stars on your chart, because you know it's right. It can be done with such a small amount of money. It's not money, it's creativity and caring. Maybe it's animals that are abused. Maybe it's old folks that people don't pay attention to anymore. Maybe it's providing one surgery for someone who has lost sight and can see again. Provide water for a family.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, set a large purpose.
It's a purpose larger than yourself that keeps you going. If it's only to meet your own needs, you will drop back into your comfort zone. But like, for example, one of the great things that came out of COVID is I've spent most of my life as a vagabond, right? Because I travel all over the earth. So in most years, I travel to 115 cities. And as you know, most of my seminars are multi-day seminars. And I go to 12 to 16 countries, like Australia 3 times. And so all of a sudden COVID hits and I had to adapt. I found this way to adapt. And now I'm reaching 10 times a day. My largest seminar is now 900,000 people versus 15,000. I did one football stadium in 2019 with 38,000 people, 40,000 people. It was incredible. Now that's a tiny seminar, because I couldn't put 900,000 people in any stadium, right? So all this good comes from that adaptation, right? Figuring out what to do. But I think the other part of it is, during that same time, one of the great gifts was I could find a way to be home and still touch people's lives so deeply and do it in a way that was impactful. I could see it and feel it. And in their home, I could see their children. I mean, it's been amazing. And now I do both. I do hybrid. I got 1,000 people in front of me in 197 countries all around me. But one of the other benefits is we'd want to have a daughter, and I told my wife, I'm not having a kid after 50. I don't want to show up at high school reunion and be 70 years old. But now I've got a 48-year-old daughter and a 9-month-old daughter, to give you an idea. I got 5 kids and 5 grandkids. But my daughter, like all the things I've ever done for myself, biohacking and health and all that stuff, now I'll be 80 at her high school reunion. So I got to use these things for a different reason. And so that doesn't let me get to a certain level and stand there. It's like, man, I got to be 92 to 102 range. In order to do that, I got to know every tool in the toolbook to turn it around. So gave me even more drive. And then what comes out of that now is I can help anybody. I mean, this is my new book, by the way. It's called Life Force. It's coming out February the 8th, but you can pre-order it now on Amazon or go to TonyRobbins.com. But the point is, it's like, I want to know every single tool. Like I got totally obsessed even more than I normally am, because it's like, okay, I got a higher purpose. I got all my grandkids, all my children, but now I got my daughter.
Rule number 6, learn to overcome difficulties.
Dealing with the loss of someone you care about is probably the most difficult thing of all. I would say maybe as a child, seeing the level of frustration between my parents, I had 4 different fathers, and watching them kind of, accept whatever life gave them it's why a lot of my drive came about, is seeing my fathers be berated by my mother, who I love dearly, and just watching them break down. Like, probably the single most painful event of my life, but also shaped me in such a beautiful way, was when I was 11 years old. We had no money for food, and it was Thanksgiving, which in America is a big holiday feast. Mm-hmm. And so we'd been without food before. We'd have crackers and butter, and we survived. But we weren't going to have a Thanksgiving feast. And there was a knock at the door, and I go to the door, and there's this giant guy there with groceries in each hand, and he had a pot beside him on the ground with an uncooked turkey. And I said, who are you here for? He goes, I'd like to speak to your father. And my mom and dad were yelling at each other, saying things that you could never take back. And I'm trying to make sure my younger brother and sister, they're 5 and 7 years younger, wouldn't hear any of this. And that day changed my life, because I thought it was going to be the most exciting day. Dad, go to the front. What is it? I said, it's for you. You answered. No, it's for you. And I remember they opened the door, and I was just so excited to see my father be happy. Like, we're going to have a feast. This is going to be incredible. And he got angry. And he's like, we don't accept charity. He went to slam the door in the man's face, and the man's foot was there, so it bounced off his foot. He still opened the groceries. And he's like, sir, I'm just the delivery guy. He said, it's not charity. Everybody has a tough time. Someone bought this, and they're sending it to you as a gift. And my father said, we don't take charity. He goes to close the door again. This time the guy's shoulder was there also, so it bounced off again. And then I was standing right there, and there was this moment I'll never forget where this man looked at my father, and he looked at me and he said, sir, don't let your ego make your family suffer. And the veins on my dad's face, on the side of his neck, I'll never forget, they bulged, like his face turned red. I thought I was going to punch him in the face. And then there's this moment, my dad's shoulders dropped. He took the groceries, slammed the door, didn't say thank you, and stormed off. And I remember thinking, like, how come he's not happy? You talk about pain. It's like, I love my father so much. And there's basically 3 decisions that I think everybody makes in their life, that whether they're aware of it or not, moment to moment. I figured this out afterwards because I was so obsessed with what's wrong, because he eventually left our family. And that was the most painful thing I ever had. So it's like feeling like I failed, I blame myself, like, why couldn't I get through to my father? I was 11 years old. But later on, it helped me understand the 3 decisions are: first, you got to decide what to focus on. Every moment of your life, there's something grabbing your focus, and you don't experience life, you experience the part of life you focus on, right? What's wrong is always available, so is what's right? And there are different kinds of focus. And my dad's focus that day was really on what he hadn't done. And I know that because he kept muttering it. He hadn't taken care of his family. There's no money for Thanksgiving. Somebody had to give us charity. And then the second decision you make about once you focus on something is, what does it mean? Is this the end or the beginning? If you think it's the end of a relationship, you're going to behave different than it's the beginning, right? My dad's meaning was that he was worthless. And so then the third decision is, what do I do? Which, whatever meaning you come up with creates the emotions, which affects what you do. And what he decided to do was leave our family. But for me, it was like, this is amazing. I mean, we have having Thanksgiving. This is incredible. We have food. What a concept. And then the meaning, though, is what changed my whole life, which was, wow, strangers care. That completely changed my life. That painful experience, I couldn't deny that somebody who wanted no credit delivered this food to my family. And so what I decided to do is say, someday I'm going to do this for another family. So when I was 17, I had 2 families, and it was a euphoric experience. I went in jeans and a t-shirt. I didn't go like the delivery guy, but I wanted to see the face of the people. And then next year was 4 people, and then it was 8. And my thing was doubling. And I had a little company, and then I got to 1 million people a year, and then I got to 4 million people a year. Then when I was doing Money Master the Game, I'm interviewing these billionaires, Jay, and I'm watching Congress cut food stamps. It's now called the SNAP program, by, I think it was $6 billion. So every family that actually needs food, and my family was one of those back then, they all have to come up with a week's worth of food out of every month. So I was like, I called my team and I said, how many people have I fed in my lifetime? I didn't know there was 42 million meals. I was like, this is pretty cool. And I was like, what if I fed 50 million people, like my entire lifetime in 1 year? And then I was like, what if I did 100 million? What if I fed 1 billion people in 10 years? So that was 7 years ago. We're at 850 million meals, right? And I'm going to hit the billion earlier than what I promised and targeted. And then I've got a sustainable approach. But I tell you that because my worst day was my best day. The most painful day, the day where I felt like I'd do the least, where I felt impotent, led me to have new understandings, new skills, new capacities, new drives, new hunger. I mean, would I really be feeding 100 million people a year, 100 million meals a year if I was well fed as a child? Probably not. And I'd love to believe I'm such a perfect person, but no, I just know what suffering feels like. So I don't want anybody else to suffer, So I think sometimes the suffering experiences of our life, if we don't let them crush us, we let them drive us, they actually become the best day in your life. And taking your worst day and making your best day is a beautiful target for anybody.
Rule number 7, live in a beautiful state.
For most of my life, help people accomplish everything, make it happen. And if you ask me, I was fulfilled, I'd say, of course I was. And I loved it. But there's different levels of fulfillment, right? If you've never smelled a rose and someone's telling you what a rose is like, you think you know to experience it. Yeah. So I had this experience in India. I go about every 2 years. And there was a friend of mine there who's built this amazing facility. And he had 250,000 people showing up for his event. They expected they would have, I think they had 100,000 people and 250,000 people showed up and then 1.2 million by the next morning. And the guy that was there is a really smart guy. And so I had a conversation with his son, and he was thanking me for all this work I've done. He goes, Tony, of all the things you've taught me, he said, I think maybe the most important thing is all the ways I can change my state. I can get unstuck. I can get myself to follow through. He goes, it is priceless. And he really thanked me. And I said, well, I really appreciate it. And more importantly, I'm glad you're using it, right? He goes, but I just have one little thing I'd like to ask you. He goes, you talk about if you're in a peak state, you get peak performance. Or if you're in an energy-rich state, a high-energy state, you're going to produce differently than a low-energy state or a lousy state. And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, what if you call those high-energy states beautiful states? I said, that's great, because it's not just happiness. A beautiful state could be excitement. It could be gratitude. It could be love. It could be kindness. It could be warmth. It could be, there's a million beautiful states. It's any high-energy state where no one has to tell you what to do. You'll do the right thing. So he goes, okay. And I said, so yeah, beautiful state's great. And then he goes, what if we took all those lousy states, those low energy states, those types of states, and what we call those suffering? And Ed, when he said that, probably kind of like what you experienced, it gnawed at me a little bit. It was like suffering. I don't like suffering. I don't suffer, but I do have times when I'm frustrated or stressed or overwhelmed. So I couldn't deny it. So I was like, okay, yeah, those would be suffering states. I felt this little trap going on in me. And I said, why do you say this?
Yes.
He goes, Tony, because I think it's the most important distinction you've made, but I like to use some other words around it. He goes, because I've set a spiritual vision for myself. I said, what's that? He said, my goal is to live in a beautiful state every day, no matter what. He goes, to me, that would be the most gorgeous life because, people have everything and they're miserable. They're pissed off. They're frustrated and so forth. He goes, you deal with them all the time. And I said, that is brilliant. But I change it slightly for me. I'd say life is too short to suffer. To me, that's where it starts. Life's too short to suffer. How could I possibly suffer when I've been able to live this magnificent life? It's just the mind. If you don't direct this thing, it directs you. It's like you use the mind or it uses you. You use stress or stress uses you. And so I said, okay, so how am I going to do that? Because it's one thing to say it. It's another to develop the habits. Right? And when I found myself getting on a plane, and I have my own plane now, obviously, but at the time I used to go to Australia 4 times a year and I'd fly on Qantas. And when I moved to Florida, it became 20 hours each way, like a 40-hour trip for one little visit.
Yeah.
And I remember getting on the plane and being so stressed. And I thought to myself, Tony, how could you be stressed? You're flying in a plane. You can fall asleep. You can, it's not my size bed, obviously, but I'm in first class and I'm very lucky. It's like, come on, what are you whining about in your head? And I realized what it was that they had no internet. So now I'm flying for 40 hours and what's happening? All my Slacks, all my emails, all my texts, it's all growing. Fortunately, I got this resolved in my head before I got lucky enough to have my own plane. And I remember when I got it worked out, I got on a plane. I flew from here to LA. I got on a plane in LA and the captain comes on and goes, says, Captain Stubblebine, it's going to be a beautiful flight to Sydney. And then he said something I never heard before. He said, today I have a special announcement and it's this. We have, for the first time in the history of Qantas, international internet. Literally, people stood up on the plane and cheered and clapped. I want to stand up too, but everybody see me, right? So I stayed there and clapped in my chair. So we all open up our iPads, our phones, everything we got, right? We're all typing, doing our stuff on social media. And 9 minutes later, what do you think happened?
It breaks down. It crashes.
And when do you think it turned on again?
When you
never. And the thing that struck me, Ed, and it's changed my life, is I looked around me and people were angry. They were cursing. What the hell's wrong with this airline? They can't get this right. Blah, 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 blah. And I looked around and I was like, this is amazing. 9 minutes ago, this was a miracle. Now it's already an expectation.
Gosh.
And then I realized all the unhappiness comes from all those expectations. You can't help have the mind expect, but you can direct it. And when you expect something that's not met, you get upset. Yeah. And it's like, if the only time I'm happy is when everybody meets my expectations, I got 105 companies, I got 3,800 employees on 4 continents. What are the chances someone's screwing up right now, meaning doing something different than I think they should? 100%. So it's like, I need to make it so that other people don't have to behave a certain way for me to be happy.
Rule number 8, serve.
The secret to living is giving. Because you're never going to be happy by what you get. You'll get it, you'll be excited for a while, for how long? But if you keep giving, you'll become something unique. That whether other people know it or not, you will know who you are. People can take away all your things. They can't take away who you become as a man or as a woman, as a soul. So business is a spiritual game. How can I do more for others than anybody else? How can I do it consistently? How can I do it better? How can I fall in love with my clients and just over-deliver at levels they can't even imagine? And develop this beautiful relationship of such joy. It isn't a transaction. There are transactions involved, but you're not doing it for the transaction. You're doing it to make that difference in their business or their life. When you're driven by a mission more than yourself, you get a level of energy that people just trying to take of themselves will never have. So my heartfelt wish for you, my dear friends, is remember what business is. It's a spiritual game. It's about what can you give, not what can you get. You'll get plenty if you'll give much more than you expect to receive. If you do that, you'll have more than money. You have a life of incredible meaning, and your life will be blessed.
Rule number 9, improve your values.
Right now, out of COVID, so many people have been shut down, a terrible place. And, I'm sure you've seen that drug overdoses are the largest they've ever been in history. It was over 100,000 people last year. Suicides, 1 out of 4 kids under the age of 30, according to the CDC, whether they're accurate or not, I don't know, have considered suicide sometime in the last 2 years. Because we all need a compelling future. We need something to look forward to. So Stanford came to me, and their genetics lab has been doing research on depression. And what they found was that by doing meta-studies, is only 40% of the people who go in for therapy, who they get drugs and therapy together usually, only 40% make any improvement. 60% don't improve at all. That's not a lot more than what you can get on some placebos. Mm-hmm. And so they approached me and said, a couple of people went through one of your programs. One was clinically depressed, they're not anymore, but we don't have any science on this. Would you be willing to let us do a science test? And I said, sure. So they came out to the State with Destiny seminar I do, which helps people to change their values and belief structures. I don't tell them what they need to be, but they figure out what it needs to be. And it changes the way you perceive life, the way you experience life, how you feel, what you do. It's a rewiring of your model of the world, basically, in 6 days. And so they said, we're going to model this after the greatest breakthrough they found in science and no one able to follow up on. About 2 years ago, Johns Hopkins did a study on depression. And they gave people psilocybin, right, which comes from magic mushrooms. And they did therapy for 30 days. And at the end of it, 53% of the people were depression free 30 days later. Never happened. Like when we say 40% are helped, the average amount of help is 50% less depressed, right? That's what the average is. Some people completely turn around, some people don't know. In this one, 53% of the people. So it's 4 times the result of any drug that ever been done. But unfortunately, psilocybin's not legal, so they're still working on that. And they said, we're going to copy that exact study. And we're going to have a group that they compared to, which didn't go to the seminar. The comparison group is going to do gratitude journaling and so forth, because positive psychology talks about that. And they said, that's probably what this seminar does, is just positive thinking. Well, the cool thing was when they came out, the results were so amazing at Stanford that they went and had 2 new additional double-blind people do the research because it just seemed so ridiculous. At the end of the first week, 63% of people had no depression symptoms. At the end of 6 weeks, it can increase through time. 100% of the people had no depression symptoms. 19% of the people had suicidal ideation. 0 had suicidal ideation. It blows away any study. It just came out. It's coming out next week in the Psychiatric Journal, which is Journal of American Medical Association, Psychiatric Journal are the 2 top journals in the field. They can't even believe it. So they're going to do more. And the actual scientific article says this is more powerful than any drug therapy or any forms of normal therapy combined. And what are we doing? We're getting people to change basically those 3 questions to some extent, because your values control what you focus on. If you're security driven and you're here down in my basement right now, you're like, where's the exit, right? You came down a slide, like, how do I get out of here, right? If you're adventure driven, you don't care. You don't even know where it is. So your focus is controlled by your values and your belief systems, right? The meaning of things is controlled by your belief systems. So those 3 decision-making things, what I'm going to focus on, what does it mean, what I'm going to do, shift. And one good example of this, Jay, is, and maybe your audience can relate to this, is if we just took 3 patterns. So let's say focus, most people have a focus either on what they have or what's missing. Mm-hmm. We all do both. Mm-hmm. But what do you think most people focus on more often? What they have or what's missing?
What's missing.
That's right. Now, even achievers do that. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like somebody who's not successful. It's one of the reasons you see these achievers that no matter what they do, it's never enough. Because think about it, if you're always focusing what's missing from your life, how can you sustain happiness? Mm-hmm. It's software that will not allow that. Mm-hmm. You'll feel happy for a little moment and then you'll notice it's missing again. What do you think's more often people focus on, what they can control or can't control?
What they can't control.
Yeah. In my seminars, it's can control. That's why they go. I want to learn how to take control of my body or my finances or my business, whatever it is. So it's the opposite. But the average person, it's what they can't control. And with COVID, there's so much you can't control around you that people really sunk in that. Well, how's someone going to feel? Just everyone think about it. If you're constantly focused on what's missing from your life and what you can't control. And then I'll add one more. Do you focus more on the past, the present, or the future? We all do all 3, but we tend to have one we focus more on. Mm-hmm. Where do you think more people focus?
Past.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And achievers focus on the future, and happy people on the present.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is love more.
It's about growing and giving. I mean, I know that's overly simplistic, but that's what I want for her. It's like, it's about laughing, loving, growing, giving, and giving passionately and generously and graciously. I don't mean just money. I mean of your presence. Yeah. It's very easy to say hello and not be there. It's very easy to say, I love you. And, it's just a habit, about, depending on which studies you read, about 47 to 52% of things we do are just habit. And the cool thing about habit is it allows you to do other things, like, trying to drive a stick shift car in the beginning is it's overwhelming. Now it's one thing. I can do 20 other things, right? But the problem with it is technology has made us become more and more habitual and less connected. And so for my daughter, I want her to experience love. That's what life is to me. And when you are loving, you have to grow to keep loving. And when you're growing and you're loving, you're going to give. And to me, if that's all she does, if she learns that life is not what you're here to get, it's what you're here to give, that you're being called to find what you're called for. And I don't know what you'll be called for. She might sing. She might draw art. She might just be a mom. It's not just one of the most important things in life. I don't know what she'll do. And I have no frame of reference about how she's going to do it. I have only one frame of reference. She's going to be a person that's earned it. And she's going to be a person who's proud of herself, because the earned part to me is where the pride comes. It's like, I have this amazing life. You could take away all the toys and things that I have. You couldn't change who I've become as a man.
Yeah.
And also because I never had those things and I earned those things, there's the stories and the examples, and you know what it's like, right? To conquer all the challenges to get there. I want my daughter to have all those experiences. But to me, life is love and life is growing and giving. It's really, that's what the whole game is about as far as I'm concerned. To me, a breakthrough is a moment in time. It's a moment when the impossible becomes possible and you don't just think about it, but you act upon it. You know, it's like you can have a concept that doesn't create a breakthrough. The breakthrough is when you get to the point where you actually are going to do something about it. And I ask people all the time, and I ask your listeners or viewers as well, it's like, I'm sure you've had a time where you struggle with something, right? You're going to do something about this relationship, but you keep not changing it, right? You know, pulling back, or you're going to stop smoking, or you're going to go lose those 25 pounds or whatever it is. And you start to make progress and then you pull back and you get disappointed and get frustrated. But then there's some times where finally you hit this threshold. You hit this moment where your brain says, not another day, not an hour, I'm changing this relationship, I'm losing this weight, I'm making this happen. And people create that breakthrough. And it can happen, it's the difference between what triggers it versus what makes it possible. What triggers it is usually pain or massive inspiration. Nothing in between does it. Most people, they hit a threshold of pain and say, it's like, I ask people, how many of you have ever been in a relationship way too long? And everybody raises their hand. I go, why? Why'd you stay? You weren't happy, they weren't happy. It's just because of the unknown, the uncertainties, the idea of change. It could be worse, to be alone. But then there's that moment when you finally hit the threshold, you go, it's been painful in the past, it's painful now, it's going to be painful in the future, I'm going to change it now. So the trigger that finally made that happen, I'd ask your audience, if they think it's something where they finally broke through, what was the trigger? Usually that moment, that day, you hit a threshold of, I can't take anymore, I'm changing, or something inspired you. You saw something was possible, and if they can do it, I can do it as well. But that's what makes it possible. What makes it last is a change in your emotions, or a change in your belief system, or a new strategy, right? You and I both know, because you're both strategists, the right strategy, hell, you can consume a book and remember more of it in 30 or 45 minutes than you did when you used to spend 10 days on the damn book, right? It's the right strategy, but you're not going to find the strategy until it's a must for you and not a should. You know what I mean? Or it's that change in belief. It's like, okay, I've put up with this crap long enough. I'm better than this. There's something more in me that you finally find in yourself. Or you finally get pissed off enough, or you get excited enough to make that real change. And so what I've studied is, I like to take complex things and make them simple, because I found that, the more, when I was really young, I tried to make things more complex. I think to try to convince myself how smart I was, or other people, I don't know what, but it's stupid, because complexity is the enemy of execution. And the only way your life changes or your business changes is execution. So it's like, how do you make it simple? And I started looking at all these, I've been doing this is my 45th year doing this. I started when I was 2, of course. And I started seeing these patterns all over the world, working with the greatest people on earth, athletes, business people, the most challenged people in prisons. Like, what are the common denominators in all these cultures? And I began to see there's 3 things you need for a breakthrough, but most of us do them in reverse order so we don't get the breakthrough. The number one thing most people do when they want to have a breakthrough, they want to change their body, want to change their finance, they look for a strategy, which makes common sense. That's what I used to do. But the problem is, strategy could be the problem, and maybe you need a better strategy, but that's not usually the real problem, right? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, 3/4 of America is overweight or obese. If we're the fattest humans in the history of the world, we all know COVID, other than age, the number one risk factor is obesity. That's number one. And yet, very few people do anything about it. And why is that? Is it because, the strategy for being fit and strong is so complex, or only the 1% know it, or it costs a fortune to do it? No, you have to be fighting not to see all the strategies to make your body physically better. They're around you everywhere. So you could have the wrong strategy. Like, I remember years ago on the cover of Time magazine, they had the Atkins diet, and they said, I think it was 15% of Americans were doing it. Well, if you gotta pee on a stick so you don't get too acidic and your breath is that bad, it's pretty obvious that's not sustainable. So sometimes it's a strategy problem. But when you work for the how first and you've never figured it out, your emotions get in the way. It's the wrong sequence. It's like the dog bit Johnny, Johnny bit the dog. Same words, different experience if you're Johnny. So strategy naturally is where people go, but rarely do they change with that. What the real problem usually is the story they've developed. And a story is just code for all the things you've told yourself over and over again until you believe them, right? There's an old language pattern that says, tell a lie big enough, loud enough, long enough, sooner or later people believe it. That was Hitler who said that. And so most of us are Hitler in our own mind. So it's not that they can't, what do people say? How come I can't lose weight? I can't lose weight because, I've tried everything. No, if you tried everything, you'd be fit, right? They didn't try everything. I've tried millions of things. Really, name them. Well, I've tried hundreds, name them. And then they'll tell you 3 stupid things that don't work that they did over and over again, right? So it's the story. I don't have a relationship because all the good ones are gone, or they're gay and I'm not, or I'm gay and they're not, or whatever the story is. The story is what'll keep you. Like, I'm sure, Jim, you have so many great strategies you share with people. Haven't you had times when you give someone an answer right there in front of them and they just can't even see it, right? They don't believe it. Because the story is literally blinding them. In psychology, we call it a scotoma, a blind spot. But then there's one level deeper than even the story. And that's your state, the mental, emotional, physical state you're in. Because when you're in a low mental, emotional, physical state, you can have all the brain capacity in the world, but you're not going to use it. And so when you're in a lousy state, you come up with a lousy story, and then no strategy works. It doesn't matter what it is. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, have you ever gotten really angry at somebody and then suddenly you remember all the ways they've ever screwed you over, you've been upset with them, right? But on the other hand, you fall in love, and what's wrong with life? Nothing. I have no money. It doesn't matter. We're in love. It's all wonderful, right? So the sequence in which we do things accelerates or decelerates or stops progress when it comes to a breakthrough. And what I found is change the state first. You and I can talk and give people a million strategies. But if I'm sitting here at home in this state and I'm just listening like this and nodding like this, yeah, that makes sense. Nothing's going to happen. So the reason that I've done events over my lifetime, and the reason why I do immersion events, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, you learn a little bit at a time, like language. You don't remember the language a few years later. But I drop you in Rome and say, you got no teacher and you got 60 days, I'll be picking you up. I'll pick you up 60 days from now, you're going to be speaking Italian, right? Especially if I put you maybe with some passionate people who are really going for it in their life. You're going to have a whole different state about you. You're going to develop a new story and you're going to figure out the strategy. So I think the challenge for most people, especially with COVID, is we've all had our state dropped. People have been isolated. They've been pushed at home. They've had expectations that have fallen away. Like I remember a year ago, a lot of people were like, all right, we got vaccines now. It's a new year. It's going to be a brand new thing, 2021. Now this year, you talk to a lot of people, they don't even have any goals or anything because they've gone into learned helplessness because they've been disappointed so many times. They start thinking the problem's forever. No problem is forever. No war is forever. No pandemic is forever. Your mind is weak now and it's gotten weak habits. And you're in a lowered state, so you start to believe that. And so it's like, you got to change people's state first, then you got to give them the story that can help them, then you give them the strategies that work, and then even if you don't give them the strategy, they'll figure out their own strategy. You're a perfect example of that, right? You figured it out because you got yourself to the point where it's like, I've got to turn this around. And then you have something that you can give and that expands your life as you've experienced, Jim.
Disappointment either destroys you or drives you, and you have to decide which one it's going to be. If you don't consciously decide, there's always going to be more BS for you to deal with. And I think, but that's why I think, when I do my events, the reason I do the 12 hours a day, it's not because I like talking. It's just that I can tell you something all day long, or I can get you to build the muscle.
Yes.
And the build the muscle is by experiencing it. I always tell people a belief's a poor substitute for an experience. Like I could have a belief about you, but now I experience you. So I get to know who you are, right? The same thing's true as like you have a belief about China, you have a belief about working out. So I try to give people experiences that are so profound. And then, the studies they did, they found people 12 months later, 11 months later, we're still in the middle of COVID. They did my digital seminar and, they measured my body, like the amount of times I jump 1,000 times in a day and I weigh 282 pounds and I come down 4 times the body weight. So it's 1,000 pounds times 1,000 pounds of pressure. My lactic acid, if you've ever been with a friend and you're running and you can't talk, the point you can't talk is a level 4 of lactic acid. I'm at an 18 and still speaking. So they decided to do that on my audience.
and they found an interesting pattern. This is the same group that works with some of the, Super Bowl champions and some of the Stanley Cup champions and so forth. There's a ratio in the body of testosterone versus cortisol, the stress hormone. And when the ratio is balanced, they call it the championship bloodline or bloodstream. It literally gets you to follow through. So when they did my audience in my live seminar, they found that people literally mirror me all the way through the experience.
That's phenomenal.
Biochemically.
That is phenomenal.
But
wow.
then we did it, because all of a sudden, overnight they said to me, we're going to San Francisco, and the governor of California says, you can only have 10 people, and we have 15,000. So I was like, we'll go to Vegas. They'll never shut down Vegas. They shut down Vegas. I was like, okay, we'll do 1,500 movie theaters with 10 people in them. They shut down the movie theaters. Like, okay, we'll go to a church in Houston. I got a buddy, I'll rent his church for 15,000 people. They're not going to keep Costco open and shut down the church. They kept Costco open and shut down the church. So I finally said, okay, I'm not going to do some crappy little webinar. So I get this vision. I'm going to build this facility with 20-foot high LED screens, 50 feet wide, all around me. I'm going to call Eric Yon at Zoom. I'm going to get them from 1,000 up to 25,000 people so I can interact with people live in real time. I'm going to build an app so they can shake it. And the more people do it, the louder it gets, so it's real. So I built this whole thing. So now we're doing bigger events than ever in our entire history. But they did the same measurements on them in different parts of the world and saw the exact same mirroring process.
Wow.
And the average person,
even digitally, just to clarify that,
71% of the people, they had 71% drop in negative emotions, 53% improvement in positive emotions, and 11 months later, in the middle of COVID, it held because it's a biochemical change. So when people say, "Oh, I'm trying," I write books because it's an easy entry point to people. There's so much you can learn from a book, but there's nothing like the experience. That's why I do the events. And like this last 2 years, because of COVID, I did 2 6-day free events. We had 800,000 people attend for 6 days, just 4 weeks ago, because I just wanted people to have answers where they are. And then people start to see, they get momentum, but it's hard to do just reading something or watching a couple of, 20-minute or 15-minute or 5-minute little pieces on YouTube.
Yeah.
Those are great. They might inspire you, but a transformation requires immersion. It's like, if you ask the average person, did you study a foreign language in school? Most people, oh yeah, high school, college, speak it. They don't. But if you turn around and you said, okay, what if you want to learn Italian? And I just took you to Rome and dumped you off for 6 weeks with no teacher, you're going to come back 6 weeks later speaking, Italian. So it's immersion. And if you want to master something, I think that's the thing most people don't do. They read a little bit, they listen a little bit, they dip in and out. They don't go day and night and day in total immersion in something that transforms them and also something that makes them push through their fears.
Yes.
Because in the end, that's the only thing that stops me. Everybody's got a story. I didn't know this person. I don't have the resources. They have all the things they don't have. But if you're resourceful, you can get the money, you can get the time, you can get the energy, you can get anything you want. And you've got to get over your fear to be resourceful. So we do experiences that are so physiologically profound that those fears do not stop you anymore. And that's how we get people to get, 10 years later, they're still transformed from an experience that was one weekend. Your happiness will never last as long as it's got expectation behind it. Don't get me wrong. I have businesses, I run them, we manage them, but I know that people are going to screw up, or my idea of screw up is different than I think they should be. And sometimes their screw up will turn into something even better. Right? I got to give it room. So what I did was I began to realize I made the decision, it's the most important decision I believe of your life, that I'm not going to suffer anymore. Life's too short to suffer, and I'm going to live in a beautiful state every day. And the way I do it is I catch myself when I start to get that sense of stress, I let it go, and I see the idea go by. So your thoughts about this person messing up your business or not following through. If I was in a room with 10,000 people, I guarantee you 60, 70% of the business owners have the same thoughts at times, right? I ask people all the time, tell me your most stressful thought. Oh, I'm worried about my children. This may happen. How many people have had that thought? Everybody. I might not make it financially, blah, blah, blah. How many have had that? Everybody. My point is, it's not your thought. It's the mind, not your mind. When you think it's your mind, you identify with it, and you can't separate from yourself. But when you realize these thoughts have been around for millions of years, and I'm just thinking the same thought that so many people have thought before. Like, how many people have ever thought, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch? Now, you didn't do it because you didn't believe you're really going to kill them. But you felt it. You said it. You were there, right? So we all have thoughts. It's only the stressful thoughts we believe that mess us up. So what I try to show people is, if you can start to realize
These thoughts have been around for millions of years. If I told you a million years, 1,000, 100 years ago that we're going to go to the moon and back, you called me a lunatic or crazy. If I said 100 years ago, you're going to have a little box like this, it'll fit in your pocket, and you can click on it and you can see what the weather is any place. You can click on it and see a live person on the other side of the earth and talk to them by looking in this box. And the way it works is invisible waves are traveling around the earth and it pulls invisible waves in the box. You go read between the lines. There's no way, you dumb idiot, it's never gonna happen. So what I want you to realize is thoughts are invisible waves. When you turn on a TV, it takes invisible waves, and depending on the channel, you're gonna see a love story or an adventure or a drama or a comedy, or horror. The way you use your body determines which of those thought waves come through you. One moment you're pissed off, the next moment somebody makes you laugh. You change your body, you change the channel, you change what comes through you. So what I've tried to do in this area, beautiful state, is simple. First, identify where you're suffering. What's your favorite flavor? Are you a worrier? Are you a pissed off person?
Stressed, angry.
What is it you do?
Yeah.
Second of all, decide you're going to kill that monster while it's little. You're not going to wait till it's Godzilla taking the city. You're going to break the pattern. You start to feel the stress. You see it as thoughts going by, and then you focus on something you appreciate, enjoy, or love. Appreciation, love, and joy destroy suffering. You can't be grateful and angry simultaneously. It's possible. You can't be worried and fearful and grateful simultaneously. So I tell people gratitude is one of the emotions to cultivate that'll destroy the suffering. And that's what we teach people to do.
You mentioned you reach out to someone, you'll text someone, you'll send a voice note or a video message, or maybe you're calling them or just saying hi to them and telling them, you're acknowledging something that they're doing well that you appreciate. I don't think that many people do this. Why is this so important for you personally? And why do you think this would help so many people get out of themselves and overcome anxiety and stress if they did this even a couple of times a week? I know you do this every day, but just a couple texts a week. Why was this so valuable for people?
Well, number one, I love people, so I love to if you just call someone to make a compliment and it's not sincere, anybody can feel that. I don't do that shit, It's like I pride myself in finding the goodness in people or the skill sets in people. And I also know that what is acknowledged tends to grow. So from standpoint of that, I want them to feel that feeling of being appreciated. I want them to know I see what's happening behind the camera, so to speak. It's like, that's what matters. It's not how everybody else sees you, it's how you really are. And then it also deepens every relationship you have when you sincerely acknowledge somebody and you notice something other people don't notice. And so it deepens the connection. And to me, quality of life is the quality of two things, your emotions and your relationships. And, if my emotions are terrible, my relationships are going to be terrible. Right. But if I have great emotions and I can extend that out to help other people, then it just makes me feel more alive. So I do it for me and them. It's a virtuous cycle.
I just hate to see people limited. I hate to see people suffering. I've suffered enough myself. I don't want anybody else to suffer. And I'm lit up by being able to see people really take control of their life. And we can't control everything, obviously. There are things beyond our control. But there's so much within our control that people give up because they're afraid or they don't want to fail or they're just pissed off or frustrated or overwhelmed or stressed. And so what I've managed to do is to take fundamental principles that can change the way you think and the way you feel and the way you behave, your finances, your body, your emotions, your relationships. I've been obsessed for principles that can make that happen. But I'm pretty good at creating an environment where I create a community very quickly where 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 people in a room for 3 or 4 days with me. And, people who wouldn't sit for a 3-hour movie because someone spent $300 million on it and you've been there. I'll have 15, 20,000 people there for 50 hours in a weekend. And nobody leaves. They can vote with their feet and they get their money back anytime they want. They don't. It's a stadium full of people who become alive. And there are different religions, different backgrounds, different belief systems, different sexual preferences, different political views. And yet we come together for a higher good. And to me, that's the most extraordinary experience. But there's an energy to it also because ideas, when people say knowledge is power, it's a lie. Knowledge is not power, it's potential power. Execution trumps knowledge every day of the week. And my job is to get people to execute. And when you get people to execute, they get momentum. And when they get momentum, it's self-fulfilling, right? Okay, I know who I am now. I know what I'm capable of. And you tend to go to higher and higher levels of contribution, of impact, and success. If you're obsessed, you know what you want, you're taking massive action. Maybe you modeled somebody, figure out the right action so you get there quicker, and you're executing, you still need a little grace. Some people call it luck. You could call it God. But I really believe that there's the part we do, and then there's the part that comes to us. But I do know grace shows up a lot more when you do the first 2 steps on your own, and grace shows up a lot more when you acknowledge grace in your life, when you acknowledge that I was born in a world where I didn't have to build this internet that I can pull out of my pocket the answer to anything on earth. I am driving on streets I didn't pave. I'm reading books I didn't have to write. That's the gift of our lives. And I think when we experience that grace, we don't just experience more achievement, but we start to experience more fulfillment.
And grace not only affects your ability to get there, but it affects what you do and how you live once you are there.
It really determines the quality of your life, because unless you live in a state of gratitude, I did an interview with Sir John Templeton, who, as you know, is one of the first billionaire investors and just a brilliant man. He came from nothing, and he donated, I think it was $750, they still do it, the Templeton Fund, I think it's $750 million a year. It's bigger than the Nobel Fund that he donates. And one day I asked him, I said, what is the secret to wealth? And he looked at me, paused, this big smile, and his eyes got really bright like they always did. And he said, Tony, it's what you teach. I said, well, I teach a lot of things, which thing? And he said, gratitude. He said, because you and I, Tony, know billionaires that are miserable, and it's because they're not grateful for what they have. And we both know people have no money, seemingly, but they're so grateful for their health, for their husband, for their wife, for their children. They're so grateful to God. They're so grateful for their life that they're rich. So I think it starts with that gratitude. It starts with that connection to grace, as simplistic as that sounds. And so it's not enough just to have your financial plan. You can have all the money and be miserable. Let's have the money and be really rich emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually.
You're really talking about the most important concept in lasting change, identity. We all define ourselves in certain ways, and most of us defined ourselves years ago, and we haven't done an update. And now you're in an environment where you're constantly told how bad it is, how terrible it is. So that stimulates the old part of the human brain, the fight or flight mechanism, the part of your brain that's always looking for what's wrong. So you can hide from it, or you can fight it, or you can freeze and hope it doesn't notice, or you can run from it. And so that part of our brain's never going to make you happy. It's an important part. There's no saber-toothed tiger for us to run from anymore or fight. Right? Not for most people. But now we get that about what are people saying about me online? or do I have enough money in a country that even if you have very little money in America, even if you're in quote unquote a poor environment, I provide 100 million meals a year. I'm almost to 1 billion meals now. I'm at 825 million meals, to give you an idea, in the last 7 years. So I'm into helping everyone I possibly can, but you got to help them here and here too. So I use the food as the excuse to get into here and here and start showing people what's possible. And I think we're in a place right now where a lot of people are in this learned helplessness, and they don't realize, if as an identity, if identity is how you've identified yourself, and you see yourself as a procrastinator, why? Because you procrastinate so many times and disappointed, you don't want to be disappointed. So now you're a procrastinator, you're no longer disappointed. You feel certain. You'll never have your goals, but you feel certain. That's what most people do in their life. But if you set, let's say, a thermostat in this room at 78 degrees and the temperature drops far enough, something's going to happen, because the computer's going to go, hey, you're at 78 degrees. What are you doing here at 68? And the heaters kick on, and suddenly you get this drive. I'm sure your listeners or viewers have had this experience many times in life, where finally it's not another day. I'm changing this relationship. I'm losing this weight. I'm going to finally do something. And then you push. Now, some people push, and they go beyond their comfort zone, beyond what they expect, not their goals. It's what they're used to. It's their comfort zone. And let's say that 68 degrees is what they're used to financially. It's not what they want, or their relationship, or spiritually, or physically. And they grow to 88, 98, 99 degrees. Suddenly the brain goes, hey, what are you doing here? You're not a 99 degreer. And then all of a sudden, the heaters stop and you lose your drive. And if that's not about, the air conditioners kick on and you start to sabotage, and you go, what happened to my life? So identity is the number one thing I work to change with people, to expand it, not to get rid of it, but expand your own sense of who you really are and what you're capable of. And people think they're going to get identity by, people say to me, I have no self-esteem. I hate that word. So overused and abused. I don't have any self-esteem because when I was growing up, my parents said these terrible things and those terrible things. And I said, isn't it convenient you only remember those things? They said a million things, but suddenly you've honed in on those. But let's get real. Someone can tell you your whole life you're a piece of crap, but you can say, screw you, read between the lines and make your life work. Someone can tell you your whole life you're beautiful, you're intelligent, you're the smartest person in the world, and you don't believe it. Because self-esteem doesn't come from what people say about you. Self-esteem is earned within yourself. It's esteem for yourself, which only comes by doing things that are incredibly difficult. And then your brain goes, this is who I am. The reason I've done firewalks for years, I used to do skydiving, but it's hard to get 30,000 people in the middle of the air above New York in the middle of the night. But the reason I did these metaphors was because when someone does something they once thought was difficult or impossible, and you get the other side, the brain goes, if I can get myself to do this, what else can I get myself to do? It changes their identity. When your identity expands, your whole world expands. If you're feeling sad or frustrated, COVID, and you don't know what's happening in the future, and you're uncertain, you go like, oh, what do I want? I don't know. Because your mental emotional state is the single most important ingredient to not only success, but fulfillment. And most of us do not know how to manage it. And when I say manage it, I'm really talking about your mind and your emotions, right? Those are the two things that if you can master those, because most people are trying to master the outside world, and you can't control the outside world. You can influence it. But the one thing you can control is how you use your mind, what you do with your emotions. And if you think about the quality of your life, again, look at people who supposedly have everything and they're miserable. I get those phone calls from the people that are so, quote, famous, the great actors, the great musicians. They won the Academy Award. They just won the gold medal, and they're literally depressed. And the reason is because they thought getting something would eventually make them feel a certain way, and it does for this long. And then you're off to the next thing. And then, when you work so hard for something forever like that, it's not there. So what I really like people to understand is that the quality of your life is the quality of your emotions. If you have $1 billion and every day your habitual emotions are feeling frustrated and stressed and overwhelmed, your life is called frustrated, stressed, and overwhelmed. If you have 3 beautiful children and a great husband or a wife or boyfriend or girlfriend, and every day you worry, your life is not love. Your life is worry. It doesn't matter how you have this beautiful family. So think of it. Emotions control the quality of our life, and we have habitual emotions. That's why you'll see people who, they're always angry about something. I'm sure you know somebody like that. Or they're always worried about something. If they're not worried about somebody they know, they worry about something they don't even know, right? Or, some people that are, think they're funny and they're not, but they have a good time, Who do you want to hang out with? So learning how to direct your emotions, and emotions create everything. Everything you want in your quote unquote success will be driven by having certain drives of emotion. And, think about it. Emotions create wars. Emotions create peace eventually. Emotions are what get you in a relationship. Emotions, how we all got here. Somebody had sex and that was driven by emotion. So we are incredibly emotionally unfit today. We're fearful about everything. It's nobody's fault. It's just culturally, we've been conditioned to get everything instantly by having it in our fingertips in our phone or our iPad or our computer, whatever the case may be. And so now when people don't get what they want immediately, I'm sure you've seen somebody standing on the street corner and they're banging on their phone like, give it a minute. It's going to a satellite and back, People today have zero patience, and then that messes up the next part that's really your life. Quality of life is quality of your emotions, but your emotions are magnified by the quality of your relationships. If you have terrible relationships, it's going to be hard to stay in a great emotional state. And so what I try to teach people is, what do you do to take control of your mind and emotions? And fundamentally, the most basic thing you got to do, especially at a time like COVID, is you got to every day have a couple of simple practices. One of those is every day you got to feed your mind. And when I say feed your mind, I mean consciously seek out something that's going to give you new insight, new inspiration, new way of looking at things. Because otherwise, today the news follows you, right? It's in your pocket. And the news people are good people, but they're doing their job. What's their job? Make as much profit as possible. How do you get the most profit? Get the most people to watch. How do you get the most people to watch? Fear. If it bleeds, it leads is the phrase they use in journalism, right? And we've seen so much fear built up now that most people have lost their faith. And you can't lose it, fortunately. It's just a muscle that needs to be regained. But you have to fill your mind. You have to pursue it. Great ideas are not going to interrupt you. They have to be pursued. And the good news is today, if you get away from just the traditional news, you can go to podcasts like Boss Babes. You can go to different locations. You can get another perspective, and you can feed your mind. But if you don't feed your mind, my original teacher was a guy named Jim Rohn. And he used to say, Tony, I got a question for you. He said, what if your worst enemy puts sugar in your coffee? What's going to happen to you when you drink that coffee? He said, you're going to have sweet coffee. He said, what if your family member, your friend, your love, by accident drops 1 drop of strychnine? What's going to happen when you drink that coffee? He said, you're going to be dead. And he goes, that's right. Life is sugar and strychnine, so watch your coffee. Like every day, you got to stand guard at the door of your mind, especially at times like this when there's so much fear. So you feed your mind. And then the second thing you got to do is the mind and the body work together. Meaning fear is physical, but so is courage. Have you ever been so scared that, like you have a hard time swallowing or you feel like in your gut, that kind of fear? That's physical.
Yeah.
But courage is not that you're not afraid. Courage is you're scared, what, Liz? But you're going to do it anyway, right? It's a muscle. And courage comes from doing something physical. So every day you got to feed your mind and you got to do something physical to push yourself beyond what you're normally comfortable with. Meaning go for a jog or a run or walk really fast or go lift some weights a little more than you're used to. Because every time you push yourself to go beyond what's comfortable, you get more comfortable with a bigger challenge. And pretty soon what was hard is easy. And it isn't just the weight or the run. It's what happens to your mind and emotions because they work together. And then what you got to do is you got to find a great role model and decide, what do I want to go after? And let me have them show me a way. Show me the way, at least the pattern, rather than me learning by trial and error. And then I got to take action. And then ideally, I got to help somebody who's worse off than I am because that'll give me fuel. That'll remind me that my life is there. I feed 100 million people every single year now. But it's because somebody fed my family when I was young. And it wasn't the food. It was that Thanksgiving, somebody showed up with a surprise and it showed that they cared. So I think if you learn to take control of your emotions, then you can take control of your entire life. But without that, it's just a pipe dream. It's just more New Year's resolutions. And within 6 or 8 weeks, you're back to where you were before. It really comes down to anyone can learn anything if it's important enough to you. What makes it important to me is not just my own life. It's like if I have a problem, my shoulder, my neck, whatever, and I can solve it, I know that there are millions of other people who can be helped by it. So it's like my drive is not just for me. That wouldn't be enough because it's easy to meet your own needs. It's not that difficult. But if you can find something that you care about more than yourself, your daughter, your son, your family, your business, your mission, your community, whatever it is, that's really the secret to energy and vitality and strength and really learning. And I think the other thing is complexity is the enemy of execution. One of the things I want to do with people during this challenge is take things that seem so complex and make them so simple so you do it. If you have a business and you got this huge complex plan, you hired a giant consulting firm, they put it all together, it never gets implemented. You know it, you've been in your companies. Why? Because they make it so complex and it's somebody else's plan. What I really want to do for people at this challenge is get it really simple, things you can do right now to change your life. You can go to experience it that day, and then you get momentum. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and all of a sudden now what used to be hard to do is easy to do. And I think for anyone, you got to understand anyone can learn anything if you can just break it down to its simple core. And that's what I try to do most. Momentum is everything, right? The hardest part in life is creating momentum. So when that all happened, I had built something of momentum over, 40 years, literally at that point. Around the world. And, what do you do all of a sudden when, suddenly they say you can't do an event with more than 10 people and you've got 15,000 people scheduled to take over the stadium. And you know what I did? I went, we're going to Vegas. They're never going to shut down Vegas, right? But then they shut down Vegas. I was like, I know I'm going to rent a church, a mega church from a buddy of mine in Houston, 15,000 people. They're not going to keep Costco open and shut down the church. They kept Costco open and shut down the church. So I got to the point where it's like, what do you do? And when you think there's nothing you can do, that's when you can do something. When you think I don't know what to do, that's when you know what to do if you just push yourself. And so I was like, I pulled my team together. I saw a guy do like a webinar with 252-inch screens. And I said, I'll kill myself first. I said, I got to create an experience for people. They need it desperately, wherever they are in the world. So literally I pulled out a tape recorder. It's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do 20-foot high LED screens, 50 feet wide, highest resolution in the world, 0.67, 50 degrees, 180 degrees around me, around the back. I'm going to call my buddy Eric Yon, and I'm going to see if Zoom, we can expand him from the little 1,000 to 20,000 or 30,000. I'm going to hire a firm to create an app so they can shake it so it sends a signal and you can hear reality of people clapping because the more you shake it, the louder it gets. And I just started creating the whole thing in an hour there. So when I was done, my CFO says, Tony, after he saw all the numbers, it was over $20 million by the time we're done. He's like, Tony, should we rent some of this first? And I said to him, listen, first of all, you can't. I said, go do your best. Not what I'm looking for. I said, second of all, this is going to be this way for a while. Yeah. And we're going to use this to help more people. And that, when things go back to normal, we get to go do that too. And I just did a Date with Destiny where I had 10,000 people from 97 countries. And then I had 500 people in front of me because I built the studio so that there's 40-foot high ceilings. So I could literally lift the 20-foot screen And so now I have a hybrid event. People that want to come personally, I'm there. People that want to be in the middle of the night in some other country are able to participate. But all that comes from just taking action and momentum.
Yeah.
If you build momentum, you can accomplish anything. You've seen it in sports. You see a team that's dominating and then somebody steals the ball and the momentum changes.
Yeah.
Your job right now is to create momentum. And that's why I'm building this challenge, is basically to say to you, let's do a breakthrough for you right now so you know it's real. Let's get you to get a real result. Let's get you to shift yourself physically and mentally and emotionally so you can build that momentum, because it takes so much energy to rocket out of the atmosphere. It takes very little to take it out of the solar system. So that momentum, I think, is critical. Most of us in life, we work so hard for things. We think life's going to be a certain way, but as you're going to discover, life is never a straight line. You know, we're taught that. We think line is just, I'm going to go from here to there. But if you look in nature, you never see a straight line in real nature. If it's a straight line, a human built it. And so it's a process of evolving, of growing, dropping back, growing, dropping back. And challenges are what really grow us. You know, your life is a great story. You know, every person's life is a story. And the question is, some people's story is a warning, some people's story is an example. Right now, you're an example that's growing and expanding, and you have a chance to have this be the most incredible life. But it won't be a life without challenge. And the challenges we're facing right now give you an opportunity to grow like very few generations. You know, I'm sure you've heard of the Great Generation, the World War II generation. If you watch a great movie, if you read a great book, you know, the size and the power of the hero, how much you become as a hero is defined by how tough an obstacle you face. How difficult is the villain, the opponent? And so sometimes when I've been through the toughest times of my life, one of the questions I've had to ask myself or note to myself is, I finally have a really worthy opponent. This is scaring the hell out of me, or this is challenging me, or this is making me crazy. But I also know in my gut and my soul that if I can push through, it's just like you've done in these years. You've pushed through tough times, I'm sure, many of them. But as you push through those, you become more. And as you become more, something magical happens. You don't just grow. You expand in your spirit and your soul and your capacity and your skill. And all of a sudden, fear becomes less and less a part of you. It's one of the things I'm behind. I have about a dozen really important things to me. Feeding people is most important to me.
Yeah.
Providing fresh water. I do that in India for 250,000 people a day personally. I'm going to get that to 1 million people in the next few years.
Wow.
It's just about infrastructure. Freeing, you know, boys and girls, women are about 80% of them. I mean, there's a new child abducted every 30 seconds. There's 6 million people in slavery around the world, children in slavery, sexual slavery. We've saved about 3,800 just in the last couple of years. I've gone on the operations myself undercover, but I work with Underground Railroad because they're former SEAL Team 6, CIA, FBI, and we teach the local government what to do to capture these people. So it's not just save some kids right now, but showing them what to do for the future. But I'm also, you know, I'm involved with so many different things. And my answer is, if I think it's core to humanity, then I'm interested. Food is, air is, you know, I've planted 10 million trees in the last year and a half. You know, I'm more fortunate to have my own private jet, but I'm conscious of that. So it's like, how many trees does my whole lifestyle take? It's about 3,000 trees. So I said, I don't want to plant, you know, 10 million. I said, screw it, I'll plant 100 million. So I planted 10 million already. I'm on course to do the 100 million, just like feeding 1 billion people. So it's the things that matter. That's what God's doing. But I do things spontaneously. I was in San Francisco and I read in the newspaper that while I'm there, I was there to see Mark Benioff. And I see that the toughest part of San Francisco is called the Tenderloin District. And there's these nuns there that feed the poorest of the poor. And they're being evicted. And, you know, it's one of the richest cities in the world. More billionaires there, tech billionaires than anyone. No one's doing anything. So I went over, knocked on the door, introduced myself, found out who the person was who was, you know, evicting him, called him up and said, look, I'm an owner too. You have the right to evict anybody. But do you really want to be the hated man in San Francisco? I said, why don't you let him stay 9 months? I'll get him out within 9 months. I'll pay you the additional rent. And I did. And then, you know, the nuns are like, they're looking for a place to lease. And all of a sudden I get a call from the realtor. He goes, they're looking for a place to buy. And I called the nuns and said, do you have some money I don't know about? They go, God will provide, as they stare at me. So I bought him a place there, you know, and my friend Mark Benioff then bought them a home to live in. So, you know, I do things spontaneously. I love those things as well. But I mean, life, the secret to living is giving. I know it sounds corny, but I had a tough time in my life. I remember I was driving on the street in this 1968 Volkswagen. I was working so hard and I was so frustrated. Things weren't going the way I thought they should. And I was like, what's wrong? And then I pulled over the side and I still have it today, this written journal. I wrote, the secret to living is giving. I started to cry because I lost the giving mode. I've gotten into the business mode. And to me, like I said, business is a spiritual game. If you're focused on giving, if you're doing more for your client or customer than anybody else, you will dominate. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. And that's what I've been able to do with, you know, my 50 plus companies. Where focus goes, energy flows.
Most people are focused on what they're afraid of, and so more fear comes their way. And it's easy because we all have a 2 million-year-old brain that's designed to look for what's wrong, to protect, so we protect ourselves, to fight it, or to run for it, or to freeze, right? That's the way our old brain is wired. It's a 2 million-year-old brain. But that brain's never going to make you happy. You have to learn to take control of your focus. And if you focus on, oh my God, it's never going to work, or you listen to somebody who tells you, COVID's going to be here forever, and we're never going to have any freedom again, and you focus on that, you can get really depressed, as most people have. We've had 100,000 people overdose on drugs. We have more depression and more people in a suicidal mode than we've ever seen in the last 2 years, because people need a compelling future. You can deal with a tough today if you got a compelling tomorrow. And so what I help people do is design that. But once you change your focus, you'll change how you feel. Focus and feeling go together. I start with the mind and emotions. And to me, that's not, I don't tell people to believe spiritually or religiously, but I believe prayer is a very useful thing. And reminding yourself you're not the center of the universe, and asking for guidance and help and other things do that. I personally believe that, but not everybody does. And I don't tell people they have to, but it starts there. But there's also, when you have a spiritual side of your life, there's a lot less anxiety because you believe there's something greater than yourself.
Right.
And then you do your part.
Yeah.
Like you said, I use a similar metaphor when I say it's, trusting God and tie up your camels, that type of thing, right? But what most people don't know is the power of their mind. So there's an entire last 2 chapters of the book. If no one reads anything else, I say, please read those 2 chapters, because if you do everything physically well and you don't manage your mind and emotions, you'll get sick. Fundamentally, the most basic thing you got to do, especially at a time like COVID, is you got to every day have a couple of simple practices. One of those is every day you got to feed your mind. And when I say feed your mind, I mean consciously seek out something that's going to give you new insight, new inspiration, new way of looking at things. Because otherwise, today the news follows you, right? It's in your pocket. And the news people are good people, but they're doing their job. What's their job? Make as much profit as possible. How do you get the most profit? Get the most people to watch. How do you get the most people to watch? Fear. If it bleeds, it leads is the phrase they use in journalism, right? And we've seen so much fear built up now that most people have lost their faith. And you can't lose it, fortunately. It's just a muscle that needs to be regained. But you have to fill your mind. You have to pursue it. Great ideas are not going to interrupt you. They have to be pursued. And the good news is today, if you get away from just the traditional news, you can go to podcasts like Boss Babes. You can go to different locations. You can get another perspective, and you can feed your mind. But if you don't feed your mind, my original teacher was a guy named Jim Rohn. And he used to say, Tony, I got a question for you. He said, what if your worst enemy puts sugar in your coffee? What's going to happen to you when you drink that coffee? Is it you're going to have sweet coffee? He said, what if your family member, your friend, your love, by accident drops 1 drop of strychnine? What's going to happen when you drink that coffee? He said, you're going to be dead. And he goes, that's right. Life is sugar and strychnine, so watch your coffee. Like every day, you got to stand guard at the door of your mind, especially at times like this when there's so much fear. So you feed your mind. First of all, if you're concerned about COVID, according to CDC, and I have this in my new book, the number one, issue besides age, obviously, the number one piece is being overweight, right? Or obese. That is number one. And just this week, CNN, New York Times, for the first time, 2 years later, are coming and saying, well, you can reduce your risk if you take care of your body, right? But do you know what number 2 is, according to the CDC? Fear. Because when you get fearful, it changes your breathing, your body temperature, your tension in your body. All these things can create a trigger of reactions, hormones in your body that make you crazy. So when I say fear is physical, here's what I mean. Fear is physical, by the way, so is courage. Emotions are physical. If you're really scared, have you ever been at that point where you're like freaked out about something and you can't quite fully swallow, or you got that feeling in your gut?
Certainly.
But courage is also physical. That's what you're talking about. Like, it's like I trained myself from a very young age that the number one thing I had to do so I would follow through on the things we're talking about here is I had to have a mind and body that were strong together. That every day I was going to do something to strengthen my body, even if it was just 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Something was going to shift me physiologically to do that. And so I get scared or I get frustrated and I go on a run, I go on a sprint, and I wasn't in shape, didn't matter. I pushed myself beyond what I was comfortable with. I go lift weights and I pushed beyond what I was comfortable with. And when you do that, everything in your nervous system changes. Because all of a sudden, when you face something and you push beyond the comfort zone, you get stronger and stronger. Even a little bit each day changes things. So think about it. Courage, you're not afraid, because there'd be no need for courage. Courage is you're scared
effortless, but you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And so training your body, and you and I both do this, right? We train intensely because we know this is the resource through which my mind's going to try to make decisions. And then the second thing is every day you got to feed your brain, your mind, because if you don't, crap is going in there automatically. We all know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, today it's chasing you because we all know the news knows they're not bad people. They're good people. They're just doing their job. Their job is make sure they make as much money for their shareholders. Right. And they know one formula works. And it's pretty obvious these last 2 years more than ever. If it bleeds, it leads. If it produces fear, more people watch. It's because we all have a 2 million-year-old brain that's always looking for what's wrong, what can hurt us. But your 2 million-year-old brain's not going to make you happy, right?
Yeah.
You have to take control of that 2 million-year-old brain and start to direct consciously what you want your life to be. So changing your body radically by a workout, by a run, by a push, by whatever you're going to do, shifting by feeding your brain every single day, and then making sure every day you're taking some form of action towards a compelling future. Like, what am I going to make better? If you have nothing to look forward to, you're going to be pissed off, you're going to be frustrated, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be overwhelmed. And in those emotional states, even though you're a smart person and you know lots of things, you won't use anything you know. So to me, the leverage to changing somebody's life is always starting with the human body. If I started to speak to you and I spoke more at this tempo, and I said, yeah, Ed, I really think people should get their act together and make this their best year ever, right? I feel terrible in my body. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to talk fast or loud like me. That's my own physiology, but it's kind of trained. But everyone has different gears. And when you're low gears, like you can be in a great relationship, somebody you totally love, and you're both in a great physical state, emotional state, everything's great. You both get a little low from taking the kids to 20 soccer practices and cash flow problems in the business and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, same love doesn't feel like the same love. You still love each other, but it doesn't come across. And if you're both stressed out, then it creates problems in the relationship. So the most important factor in your life is the ability to manage your mental, emotional state. Is the one thing you have complete control of once you learn how. Then it becomes just the daily discipline. And it's not even discipline, it just becomes habit. To say, I'm not going to live in this lousy pace. I'm not going to put up with it. I know what to do. Let me do it. Let me move forward. But that's why, I do programs and events where I immerse people.
Yeah.
Because, you and I can talk about this 2 minutes, kind of nod your head. But if I put you in an experience,
correct.
I always tell people a belief is a poor substitute for an experience. You can have a belief about China. I take you to China, you're going to have an experience. It's very different.
So true.
And so I think human beings need to put themselves more in experiences. A lot of us today, especially with COVID, being stuck at home and doing business from home, a lot of people are stuck in their head. Yeah. I tell people, get in your head, you're dead. You'll just go in circles.
Get in your head.
You got to get that body and that energy moving, and then your head will start to work as well.
Ultimately, I really believe that probably the most sacred thing in our lives that we can give another human being besides our love is our labor. You think about it, your labor is your energy, it's your time, it's your emotion, it's your intellect, it's your spirit to some extent. And if you can find a way where what you do for a living activates that sense of what you're made for, then work is not work, whether you be in Fiji or whether you be in an environment that might seem less exciting and promising in the moment. And trust me, I worked in plenty of those too. But with the same level of excitement and passion, because I found what turns me on, that makes me feel alive, makes me feel like I'm doing something that's worthwhile. And on Labor Day, I think a lot of people, it's just a holiday to get away and take time off of labor. And my hope is to trigger you to think about how could you turn your labor into your love? I think it was Mark Twain who said, when your vocation becomes your vacation, that's when life becomes truly magnificent. And I'm privileged enough to have that, but I pursued it. And one of the secrets that I found, and I know you know this in your soul, is that we all know if you're going to be masterful at something, you don't show up, as the best in the world at something. You don't show up in environments that you want to be in. You get there because you did things for thousands and thousands of hours. Most of you know the concept of mastery taking 10,000 hours. It's an arbitrary number, but I'm sure you've heard about it. You want to get really good at something, it's 10,000 hours, because when you do something enough, with enough intensity, enough intention to constantly get better, when your labor is your love, and where your labor is something you have to always get better at, then usually what happens is you get these insights that allow you to serve more. But I also think that labor, we're talking about this weekend, what makes people fulfilled by their labor is their motives for it. If your motive is just to make money or just to pay your bills or just to get rich or whatever you think that's going to be, those people never really are fulfilled even if they make the money. The most fulfilled human beings in my experience, and and I've had the privilege of working with literally 4 million people from 125 countries now around the world, the people that are most alive, regardless of the economics, are people that have found something that they really feel the motive is more than just themselves. You know, we all know what it feels like when you're trying to do for something for someone you love and you're not doing it as a trade, you're not trying to get something back, you're just doing it because it's what you're made for. And I always tell people motive does matter. That if you're just doing something for yourself, there's nothing wrong with that because life supports whatever else supports life. If you're part of life and you're trying to do something that's going to make your life better, I think the universe, God, whatever proper term for you, whatever your belief system is, you know, infinite intelligence gets connected to you and it gives you insights. But I think if you're trying to serve more than yourself, more life than just you, when things support more of life shows up to support you. And that might sound kind of airy-fairy, but it's my experience. You know, when you're trying to support your family, when suddenly I had 4 kids, 3 of them overnight, my life changed, my intellect changed, my abilities changed, because I was trying to serve something more than just me. When I started really focusing on how to serve a community and then a country and then humanity, as corny as it may sound, you get insights you won't get when you're just trying to somehow, you know, make your labor happen or get the job done. So labor could be love, and it isn't for most people. Most people, I think, are unhappy in their life because they look at labor as work. They look at it as, why should I have to effort so much? And in my experience, effort is the reward. If you are doing something you love, it's there. So if you don't have it, you might say, Tony, that's all wonderful. You're in Fiji and you do what you love and I don't have that. Thanks so much for giving me the lecture. I'm not coming from that place. I'm coming from the place of saying you can discover something that you're really passionate about, but in order to do it, you got to get out of the story of what you can't do and you got to put yourself on the line.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. If you want to see my recent interview with Tony Robbins, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
There is a regenerative revolution that's happening in medicine right now, in precision medicine. Billionaires know about it, but the average person doesn't. What pushed me over the edge recently is I had some experiences that really hit me hard.